concept of sovereignty on a personal level is one of the biggest hoaxes of the Matrix. I see a lot of people when they start going to the work of trust and exploring that rabbit hole, they're also playing with this idea of sovereignty because naturally they realize that, oh, we need some separation in order to protect ourselves from the powers that be, whether that's the US government, whether that's other large sovereign powers. We as individuals need a way to protect ourselves. And so naturally, people equate sovereignty with freedom, and they sort of pursue that as a road and aspiration for what they should be trying to do. When the reality is that for an individual to be sovereign, it's just not possible in this reality. So first of all, let's define what sovereignty actually means. Under most definitions, the simple way to define sovereignty is a supreme power or authority. And this is especially in the context of a government or other kind of body politic that, rules over a bunch of people and is considered sovereign. So when we look at the world today, part of, what hints at sovereignty as being important is that when you look at the United States is a corporation. So most people are just operating under that corporation, not even aware that that's the case. When you start going outside the United States, that's when it becomes obvious that there are foreign powers that are sovereign from the US. And some of these control large amounts of money and large amounts of land and resources and various other things. And in the context of the world, the US is probably, I would say, the most sovereign, and just because we have the largest military and everything else stems from that accordingly. The dollar is the strongest currency in the world, and through those two mechanisms, as well as the legislature that pretty much the entire world settles to, the US government is really the supreme sovereign kind of power in this world when we look at just the physical nature of this reality. But when we want to escape from that, people, the natural inclination is to think, okay, how can I become sovereign myself? Other countries are doing it. There are countries that have sovereign wealth funds. So as an individual, how do I do that? And that's where, to me, it's really not possible, but there's books literally written about this, how individuals can gain their own sovereignty. And if we define this idea of personal sovereignty, one of the definitions that I particularly liked was this idea that the concept of property in one's own person is expressed as the moral or natural right of a person to have bodily integrity and be the exclusive controller of one's own body and life. So yeah, just the basic idea that we have self-agency and governance over ourselves and anything that is in our domain, and any kind of assets that we would have. Now, one of the interesting things is part of the American dream and this idea of what the US is that we do have freedom and that we do have the right to control our own bodies and the right to say what we want and do what we want to a certain extent. But when we look behind that American dream and just kind of tear through the shroud that is the papery film over the heaping pile of excrement, we can start to really see that the US is designed as a corporation to enslave its subjects. So there's definitely no sovereignty whatsoever if you're gonna just use what the government gave you with your straw man, your social security number, or any other kind of legislative or public entity to operate. So that leads us down the rabbit hole where if there are other countries in this world that are sovereign to the US, how are they doing it? Because the US and other governments, they all have to transact and do business with each other. And so sovereign powers are doing business with each other all the time. So we have to ask ourselves the question, what kind of accounts are these sovereign powers using? Because money is moving hands from one government to another and from different private parties to other private parties. So what kind of accounts that are business accounts actually fall under the category of sovereign? Like, what do these sovereign wealth funds use when they're moving money in and out of countries and even in and out of the United States? And that's the first hint, as far as how we go down and start to arrive at the fact that irrevocable trusts are the pathway to, achieving some sort of sovereignty. But here's the part where it really gets nuanced. I see a lot of people going into the private trust world and they're calling themselves, a sovereign citizen, with this idea that they want to be sovereign and separate from the United States. Now, I understand that inclination, and of course, I myself wanted the same thing when I started out. And typically, people will go down different rabbit holes to try and get that. Trusts are one rabbit hole where people think that, if I sign some kind of private trust, now I'm sovereign from the US because I have a border that is in the trust document that protects me. Another interesting place that I've seen people try to find sovereignty is in the crypto and Web3 world, where because of the technology of blockchain and public-private key encryption, people have kind of realized that, okay, we're trying to store capital, and now we can do so in a way where a centralized government or power doesn't control it. And that was the theory behind Bitcoin, where you have this decentralized network of miners across the world that are independent of any one government or even private or political party. And so that can give individuals a certain amount of power and sovereignty back with the ownership of those assets in a digital sense, via public-private key encryption. Now, again, even in the crypto world, through all the ups and downs that we've seen over the years, Bitcoin is nearing all-time highs, and there is a lot of institutional adoption and a lot of, I would say, stability in a relative sense when we look at that technology versus, a lot of other things that are in the middle of collapse. Many of the external technologies on the fringe around crypto and digital assets, a lot of those have been frauds and have rugged and washed away, many people in that. But the core of the blockchain technology is clearly incredibly useful. And when it comes to actually creating a shield that's able to store capital behind it, it is highly effective in the sense that there's no way that I know of to actually break a public-private key chain. There's no way to brute force hack that. I know a lot of people say they get hacked, but that technology where you have a key protecting a wallet, that is what many people have considered sovereignty when it comes to money. Now, why I take issue with that exact definition is that even in that case, in the case of crypto, you're still not actually sovereign. Why? Because sovereignty means that you're completely independent and you have the power to defend yourself. And that is where, when it comes to crypto, we've seen that even the most robust, hidden crypto wallet on some privacy chain, even those wallets typically can be compromised when it comes to actually going on the blockchain and doing different types of forensic analysis to see where, that person is using that wallet from, and as well as a number of other different variables. And so what ends up actually happening is if someone tries to be sovereign by, let's say, hiding all their assets on the blockchain, all that would happen, in a theoretical attack against that sovereignty is that you would just have a party that's bigger, larger, that has military force, that has, the ability to do blockchain forensics, and they would be able to go after that person and that wallet. And inevitably, even if they couldn't hack through the wallet, guess what? They can find that person, they can get guns, they can stick it to their head, and they can be like, open the wallet. So in that sense, to truly have, money on the blockchain that's sovereign, you would literally have to have your own defense force. You'd have to have, everything would have to be cloaked in privacy through some kind of different protocols. And then even beyond that, you'd have to have some sort of ability to be self-sufficient where you could really enforce that sovereignty. Because sovereignty needs to be enforced. You can't just say, oh, I'm sovereign. Like, a lot of people try and do that, and that's where I know it's just utter bullshit. Someone who says that to me clearly doesn't understand the earth that they're standing on, because no human being in and of themselves is powerful enough to be sovereign. And most of the train wrecks, that we've seen in the crypto space over the years also tell that same story. And so going back to the world of trust, there's certain people that come into this work where they think, oh, I can be sovereign and I can use some kind of trust document to be sovereign. But the reality is that's not how trusts work. And in particular, when it comes to the private common law irrevocable ecclesiastical trust, which is the one that we use here at Bulletproof Retirement and I recommend to all my clients, this particular trust, it will get you to a great degree of freedom, a very, very great degree of freedom, and definitely freedom from the US government. So there will be a barrier there that will stop the government and stop other external parties from attacking you. However, when you look at how the trust is constructed, right, that is really absolutely key. And anyone who tries to construct a trust as someone who's sovereign is not doing it right, because they will not have the power to enforce the sovereignty of that trust. The IRS will come and break it open, the government, someone will come and break it open. Most of the times these trusts are statutory anyway, so they're already under the government, and the person who did that, already fucked that up. But let's say you're in the world of private trusts and you're exploring the one that we use. What makes this trust so powerful is that you're pledging servitude to Jesus Christ. And you're admitting that, no, I am not sovereign. I see that the power of the government and I see the power of the devil in this world. And if you don't want to submit to that power, what do? This world is duality. It's God versus the devil. That is all that there is. That is all that's happening here. And so if you don't want to be under the jurisdiction of one, in this case, the government, the devil, well, the only other choice is to be under the jurisdiction of Christ, of God. And the opposite to that, which are the two opposing forces in this world. And this trust, it absolutely enforces that same principle. Because there's no trust document that's truly private that can be written without servitude and without pledging your life and your soul to Jesus Christ. And sometimes people ask me, what if I want to pledge myself to Muhammad or Krishna or someone else other than Christ? The reality is that Jesus Christ, is not just a figure in history, but Christ is also a state of consciousness, a state of being that many perfect masters throughout history understood. And so as long as we can align ourselves with the perfect masters that walked before us, Jesus Christ included, and we can align ourselves by using their words and their protection, in this case, in a trust document, that is how we're going to achieve as much freedom in our ability to operate as possible. We will definitely not be sovereign, but we will be operating in a way of service, in a way that makes a lot more sense than being of service and being in the jurisdiction of the government. Because when you're doing it that way, you're jumping through all kinds of hoops with the devil, you're paying taxes. I mean, it's just like insane. And people volunteer to do that because typically they think they don't have a choice. And then, it's so interesting how all the HIPAA Christians in the Matrix, they all pledge service to Jesus and this and that. But if they really believed that God was loving and God would give us a path to defend ourselves from the devil and from all the demons and just the derivatives of that negative state of consciousness that want to attack us, there is a way. And that way is a very specific type of trust, and it's the one that we use. And I've been using this for years, and we have many clients that have been doing this for a very long time. And so if you jump in the description and the link, we're going to put the link there to the Bulletproof Retirement community. And that's where you can jump in and learn more about exactly how we do this trust and how we enforce those protections. But, this is an important point because this world, there's so much matrix propaganda around, being in service to the government and paying taxes. Then the next step is all these people awakening and thinking, oh, well, now I have to be sovereign. I have to be free from the government. And that's a big wave that I'm seeing. A lot of these people that are just trying to go off the grid and just declare that, oh, I'm free now. It doesn't work like that. You just can't just declare that. You have to do it in a way that actually shows and proves in writing that you really did your research and did your homework. And that's where this document comes in. And that's ultimately what all the perfect masters and what Jesus Christ would want us to do, to really show that we understand the way that this reality works, and that we're going to actually walk the right path and then enforce that understanding, through the way we walk. So I hope many of you consider that. Although I understand your burning desire for freedom, sovereignty is not the way. We need to figure out how to create trust, not just in Christ, but trust with each other, trust with our family, and we need to work with people to survive. Human beings are not meant to live alone, and that's part of what this trust work is. It's not just a document, it's spiritual and financial information that allows us to use trust to navigate this matrix that we're in. And this is a complex, cold, and very lonely world without that. So I wish you all the best of luck in navigating this. It's definitely a nuanced and complex thing to decipher. And I look forward to seeing many of you in our community.